Good afternoon, Tom Sox fans, and welcome into the latest edition of Tom Sox Today. We got out of the press box, we got down here on the field to talk about the Tom Sox, a team that's been really, really good over the last 10 games. I'm here with Russ Beiswanger. Russ, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, Russ is the man with the stats. He had the bird-eye view from above the press box for the last game, which we'll break down in a second, but we'll also talk about the upcoming match against Front Royal and a couple of the other games you'll see over the next stretch. But Russ, we saw the Harrisonburg's Turks on Friday. The Tom Sox take them down 11-1. The second back-to-back mercy rule for the Tom Sox. The game before that against Stanton, 15-1. Now 26-2. They've outscored opponents in their last two games. Russ, you had the best view in the entire park. What did you see in that matchup?
Well, absolutely. Like you were saying, I mean, you really saw the Tom Sox with those gifts as we've seen all season, with those really explosive innings, just a couple innings, putting up 4 runs, 5 runs, just blowing up the score against the Harrisonburg Turks. Everyone really contributing on the batter's side of things, as I'm sure you'll go over. 11 runs on as many hits and really spreading the wealth around, kind of 1 through 9. So hopefully they can continue that.
Now, like you mentioned, 8 players had hits, 7 had RBIs in this matchup. A really dominant performance from everybody on the Tom Sox roster. You also saw pitchers like Garrett Payne and Parker Stinnett, guys who weren't on the roster at the beginning of the season but are now integral parts of this team, really step up and have their moments. So I think it's safe to say that everybody on this roster stepped up, but ultimately we saw the Tom Sox now have back-to-back mercy rules in this game and in the game before that. What do you think this means for a team going forward now that they're able to blow teams out and really end games early?
Well, absolutely, Eric. I mean, that's a good sign. The mercy rule introduction obviously playing out a lot to the Tom Sox benefit so far, and I think it's a very good sign being able to get production, as I said, 1 through 9, but also from the old and the new guys on this team. As you said, Parker Stinnett, one of those pitchers that got some action, one of the Mississippi State pickups. Fresh off of, that College World Series appearance, pitching scoreless 2 innings, 4 strikeouts, and only 1 hit. So, I mean, lot of new production, lot of good new faces for the playoffs coming up that are really buying in.
Now, and one of the names you can't forget to mention, RJ Ochoa has been really, really good for this Tom Sox team since he's come in back-to-back home runs on back-to-back nights. Pretty good sign when a guy comes in and hits 2 home runs in 2 games. We've seen that a couple of times this season, but really look to him to continue to keep going. And now they're going to go up in this match against Front Royal today, Monday. And it's a doubleheader. First pitch is at 3 p.m. Second game will be 30 minutes after the first game, so good opportunity to see a lot of Tom Sox baseball. Front Royal is a team that, like we've seen in the last couple of matchups, can really hit the ball but can't really pitch. And ultimately this game is a makeup from earlier in the season. On June 13th, it was a rainout. Got just a couple innings in that one. A lot of guys who were on the roster are now gone. A lot of guys that have never played against Front Royal are now here. Russ, ultimately in a doubleheader against a North opponent who you're only going to see one time unless you see them in the playoffs, how do you kind of make your adjustments knowing you haven't seen this team at full strength?
Well, I think, as you said, we haven't really seen them. They have to really approach this game with a lot of humility, I think, because the Tom Sox, obviously, as you said, on paper, look quite good. They are number 1 in the South Division, while Front Royal still 5th out of 6 in the North. But that has the markings of a trap game for the Tom Sox, especially given that it's 2 games. I mean, Tom Sox have the ability to kind of cruise through these final games with a really high spot in the playoffs, but Front Royal just 1.5 games back from Winchester, I believe, for the 4th slot. So they're really fighting for their playoff lives here. They're going to give everything they got, and as we don't really have any film we can go to or any kind of videos to rewatch of earlier in the season. We can't say, make some adjustments based off what we did in an earlier game, because there is no earlier game. So it's really just being able to keep that mentality going.
Now the Cardinals have 8 guys batting over 300 on the season. They also lead the league in hits as of Sunday. I want to pull stats from, after Sunday because the Tom Sox don't play on Sunday, but as of right now, they have just an absolutely great batting roster. But pitching-wise, they have a lot to be left desired. Second most runs in the VBL, most hits, second most walks, and the second highest ERA at 6.42. They really can't pitch the ball, and we've seen the Tom Sox have great success recently being able to hit the ball. 26 runs in 2 games. Ultimately, when you know a team like Front Royal is struggling, Russ, how do you adjust as a batter and really be able to play at your best and kind of not play down to their level?
I think just keep the momentum going from the past couple of games. I mean, if you said 2 straight mercy rules outscoring their last 2 opponents 26-2 combined, So I really think it's just a matter of keeping that mentality going. As you said, RJ Ochoa from Texas Rio Grande Valley, among all these other guys, him hitting two straight nights with home runs. So we've clearly seen all these batters for the Tom Sox are really locked in right now. They're not just gonna kick it into low gear until the playoffs go. So I think it's just a matter of keeping that going and really taking advantage of this matchup and trusting the pitchers to shut it down on the other end.
Now, two teams going with completely different motives in this one. Front Royal is fighting for the 3 or 4 spot with Newmarket and Winchester. The Tom Sox, they have the South locked up, but they need to keep pace with the other teams in the North, like Strasburg, to keep that #1 spot. So two teams moving in different directions, but ultimately two teams that would love to go 2-0 on the day here at Crutchfield Park.
100%.
Now, as we look into the next couple of matchups, we'll see for the Tom Sox, you'll see Harrisonburg on Tuesday here at home, Waynesboro away, and then you'll end the week Friday at home for the last regular season game for the Tom Sox. So a good stretch here, 4 of their last 5 games being at Crutchfield Park. Russ, we've seen what Crutchfield Park has done for these fans. We've seen what kind of atmosphere it has compared to different ballparks, as you and I have both seen traveling. Ultimately, what do you think home field advantage means for the Tom Sox, knowing that they'll have a good stretch of games to close out the year here in front of their fans?
Well, home field advantage, I mean, it's not overrated at all. I mean, we have the newest program in the Valley League, which also matters. So, I mean, this has very much been like a fresh injection of life into the city for kind of filling that need for local sports during the summer. So it's definitely lots of high attendance when late season, when big games, when playoffs come around. We're finishing up the season on Friday against Waynesboro, which that's kind of, if you had to pick a rival that we've developed, it's probably them. I mean, you know, the two real close teams, real easy drive for their fans too, so there might be some of them down here. But I mean, I definitely feel that the home field advantage here in such a historic city like Charlottesville, you know, you got the UVA sports culture, you have a lot of things going on in this town, so I think it's going to matter a whole lot.
And like you mentioned, Waynesboro has kind of been that late season spoiler. We saw them ruin Chris Long night. We've seen them blow out the Tom Sox a couple of times away, so a really good chance for the Tom Sox to kind of shore things up going into the playoffs, as Waynesboro, Harrisonburg, and Stanton will be the representatives besides the Tom Sox in the playoffs, with Covington now being out for the season due to COVID. But ultimately, the Tom Sox have a lot they need to still do over these next couple of games. So even though they've had a really solid record and done really well, you can't sleep and you can't relax, because a team like Front Royal could come in and disrupt all of your plans come playoff time. Now, as we look ahead towards the rest of the league and ultimately what this means for both teams, Front Royal, like you mentioned, currently sits 5th in their division in the North. They're a couple games back from Winchester, a couple games back from Newmarket, both chasing Woodstock and Strasburg. The Tom Sox currently 8.5 games up on Harrisonburg. We'll see them also the same amount up on Stanton, and then Covington obviously being out, and Waynesboro being the Tom Sox, unofficial rival. But ultimately, this game, like I mentioned, means a lot for both sides. Front Royal, they need to keep pace and make the playoff. The Tom Sox need to get the best possible place in the playoffs. So when you have two teams kind of looking at different scenarios come playoff time, ultimately, how do you adjust for both sides, knowing that one team is looking to kind of put icing on the cake while one team still needs to get into the playoffs?
Well, I think the simple answer is you really don't treat it differently than any other game. I mean, as we've said, Front Royal is very hungry. They're going to be coming in really fighting for their playoff lives here. That kind of 3-way race for the 3 and 4 seed in the North is going to be really competitive. And on the other hand, the Tom Sox, would really love to keep that home field advantage for as far into the playoffs as they can, including the championship series, really. So I think it's just a matter of keeping the bats going, just keeping the momentum going that we've seen here at Crutchfield Park these last few nights.
Now, ultimately, Russ, we've seen the team grow and change and kind of adjust their dynamic throughout the year. They're actually trailing Front Row before the game was called last time, and they've made some adjustments, and they've really got out to one of the hottest records in the VBL, currently the best, sitting at 26-9. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. The Tom Sox do still have some work to do. There's always places they go up and advance. If you could pick one thing for the Tom Sox going forward for the rest of the year to work on come playoff time, what would it be?
I don't know. I mean, that's really tough to say. As we've said, the Tom Sox are really on fire in a lot of ways. I would say not as much something to work on, but just something to watch for is kind of ensuring, as we've said, the Tom Sox have sometimes had a penchant for these really explosive innings, but you just want to not let that lose sight of just taking every at-bat on its own. Don't kind of count on having a few explosive innings, and if you do have one, don't just kind of rest on your laurels from that inning. I mean, you really want to keep the production going steadily. So that's what I would say. Just keep on, 1 through 9 in the lineup. Just keep it going.
Yeah, I think consistency is probably the biggest thing the Tom Sox need to work on. Like you mentioned, it's good to get those 4 or 5, run burst innings, but at the same time, if you don't get those, then it can be kind of stagnant. We saw the Tom Sox get a decent lead against Harrisonburg, but yet it was kind of quiet the rest of the game until they ended up breaking out in the last couple innings. So I think consistency is probably the biggest thing for the Tom Sox, but when you have one of the best bullpens in the Valley Baseball League and you have one of the best batting lineups in the Valley Baseball League, I think it says a lot about your team, and I think this team can honestly make a lot of noise come playoff time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first pitch against Front Royal will be at 3 p.m. here at Crutchfield Park. The second game will be half an hour after the first. So you get to see 14 innings of Tom Sox baseball, something that we haven't seen in quite some time. So it should be a good opportunity for the Tom Sox to really get out in front of their crowd again, as they do have a long home stretch to end the season. And ultimately, a 14-inning day is much better than a 9-inning day here at the Crutch. So it should be an opportunity for Tom Sox fans to get to watch the team in action. Russ, thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Now, admission and parking are free all season long, thanks to Carter Bank and Trust. So if you haven't been out to a game this season, you've been out to every game. There's a great atmosphere. There'll be fans up here on the hill. There'll be fans over here sitting in the bleachers. So it should be a lot of fun for everybody involved. We have some great promotions coming up, so you won't want to miss the Tom Sox baseball. For David Argo, for Russ Beiswanger, for the entire media staff, I'm Eric Fenstermaker. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you at the ballpark.